Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You are all kindly requested to be seated. I request the audience to please switch off your mobile phones or put them on silent mode. The seminar shall commence shortly. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or on silent mode. Now, I would like to request you all to kindly rise from your seats for the national anthem of Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, I request your attention for the recitation of Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأعدوا لهم ما استطعتم من قوة ومن رباط الخير ترهبون به عدو الله وعدوكم وآخرين من دونهم لا تعلمونهم الله يعلمهم وما تنفقوا من شيء في سبيل الله يوفى إليكم وأنتم لا تظلمون صدق الله العظيم.
Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now commence this seminar. I, Hansa Qureshi, on behalf of President Center for Aerospace and Security Studies, Air Marshal Farhat Hussain Khan, and CAS team, welcome you all to today's CAS seminar. Ladies and gentlemen, CAS is an independent and non-partisan think tank that envisions to serve as a thought leader. Our mission is to provide independent insight and analysis on aerospace and international security issues. We shall now see a small introductory video showcasing the scope of CAS's activities and a message from President CAS. Thank you.
Fill in the knowledge and research gaps that existed in the domains of aerospace and national security in an otherwise think tank rich capital Islamabad. To achieve our objective of being amongst the best think tanks of the region and with focused mission, CAS has made significant contributions by providing policy guidelines on important issues of national interest, especially security, both in military and non-military domains, disseminated through direct as well as indirect engagement on regular basis. As part of the advisory board of the Government of Pakistan's National Security Division, CAS has and would continue to serve as a thought leader by providing independent, innovative, evidence-based solutions to strengthen Pakistan's national security, including specific emerging geostrategic and geo-economic situations. Maintaining a winning aerospace power requires high-end technologies that are not only cost-intensive, but their availability with the passage of time is likely to be challenging. In our region, these technologies are largely acquired. Therefore, working towards our vision of strengthening national security in all its domains through indigenization, CAS would continue to lay emphasis on innovative research on emerging technologies, including but not limited to cyber and space. We continue to enhance our reach through greater use of media, seminars, webinars, digital technologies, joint research, and cementing our relationship with domestic, regional, and global partners. Inshallah, in times ahead, we will continue to build upon our achievements.
Ladies and gentlemen, the topic of today's seminar is Disruptive Technologies, Impact on Future Warfare. CAS believes that emerging disruptive technologies will have significant impact on military and non-military affairs in the future, entailing greater significance for a country's security, economic growth, and scientific prowess. CAS believes that Pakistan, as a developing nation, also needs to benefit from the advantages that these technologies have to offer. And in this regard, today's seminar is bringing together a core group of experts to critically analyze the latest developments and future trends, and to explore options to reap greater benefits. Today's seminar will be moderated by Air Marshal Ashfaq Arain. Air Marshal Arain is advisor to Chief of Air Staff PAF on CAS affairs. He is currently serving as Director Emerging Technologies and Global Conferences at CAS. He has made significant contributions in the research domains of hybrid and cyber warfare and emerging technologies. Air Marshal has also taken prominent positions in various Track 2 dialogues. He is a graduate of Combat Commander School, PAF Air War College, and National Defense University, Islamabad. During his career in PAF, he has served in senior command and staff assignments, including Commandant of Operational Base, Air Advisor Pakistan's High Commission in New Delhi, Assistant Chief of the Air Staff Operations and Plans, and Director General Air Force Strategic Command. Air Marshal has been decorated with significant awards of Tamga Imtiaz Military, Sitara Imtiaz Military, Hilale Imtiaz Military, and Sitara Basalat. So without further ado, I would invite Air Marshal Ashfaq Arain to please take over as the moderator.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Respected guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening. I, on behalf of President CAS, Air Marshal Farhat, and Team CAS, once again welcome you to the seminar on disruptive technologies, impact on future warfare. Technological advancements are essential to economic growth and development. While most technologies are useful for military and civil applications, few are essentially developed for military purposes. These game-changing technologies, also called disruptive technologies, have the capability to displace an established technology and shake up the industry with a groundbreaking product that creates a completely new industry. While emerging technologies offer enormous opportunities, they also present novel security challenges. State actors, non-state actors, and individuals are likely to have greater prospects of exploiting these easily accessible technologies in inventive and possibly disruptive ways. If used intelligently, these can also be employed by smaller states to offset military asymmetry. In an endeavor to maintain lead, the rapid technological advancements have therefore resulted in increasingly intense competition, which is gradually shifting towards rivalry between these states. Emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, advanced materials, hypersonic weapons, biotechnologies, and robotics are likely to make profound effects in bringing about major changes in the world in general and triggering major doctrinal and strategic shifts in the military in the military domain in particular. Considering dynamic character of interdependence between technology advancement and its adaptation in the military affairs, the key question therefore is that in what ways these technologies may affect military doctrines and strategy in the future. The question gains greater significance in case of nuclear armed adversaries with unresolved disputes, mutual distrust, and shared borders with reduced reaction time. Today, we have a very distinguished panelist with academic knowledge and practitioner's experience who will discuss civil and military applications of these technologies and help us explore the way forward. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'll introduce our first speaker. General Zubair Mahmood Hayat, Nishan-e-Imtiaz Military, former Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee, is the keynote speaker. He will discuss risks and opportunities associated with disruptive technologies. Commissioned in 1976, General Zubair Mahmood Hayat had a decorated military career spanned over 4 decades. He is a graduate of Fort Sill, Oklahoma, USA, Command and Staff College, Cambridge, UK, and National Defence University, Pakistan. He has 2 master's degrees in war studies and military science. He is also a recipient of Humanities Gold Medal, Master Gunner Award, and Master Warfighter Award. He has delivered lectures on peace, security, and defense in foreign military institutions and think tanks across 6 continents. During his service, the General has commanded an infantry division and a corps. His key staff appointments included Army and Air Advisor UK, Chief of Staff of a Strike Corps, Private Secretary to Chief of the Army Staff, Director General Staff Duties at GHQ, Director General Strategic Plans Division, and Chief of General Staff, Pakistan Army. In November 2016, the General took over as the 16th Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee. He is also the 3rd Colonel-in-Chief of Regiment of Artillery. Sir, I will now request you to please enlighten the audience with your views. Sir. Your choice.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I wish to once again, first of all, thank CAS, Air Marshal Farhat and Air Marshal Ashfaq Rai for inviting me to this seminar today on a very important subject which is not only contemporary but also futuristic in nature, that is on disruptive technologies. I will not take much of your time. In fact, I will not even take 20 minutes, for I wish to just highlight what I think is important for the future discourse. I'll just try and provide a context, domains and effects of disruptive technologies, risks and opportunities, and give you some concluding thought. I'm glad to see many known faces in the audience today. You're most welcome. Now, my opening construct basically revolves around 4 points. A, any technology which is new is disruptive in nature, and therefore there is nothing new per se about what we now term as disruptive technologies. 2, all technologies have always acted as a catalyst for change. Therefore, I have full reason to believe that disruptive technologies will also be a harbinger and catalyst for change. 3, I believe what disruptive technologies will do is basically help in the reset that is taking place. I'm not talking from a conspiratorial point of view, but I'm talking from an academic point of view. A reset is on, and disruptive technologies will accelerate that reset. So what disruptive technology are doing is that they are providing basically a new toolkit in the hands of the policy makers. That is the fundamental point for today. So it's a new toolkit that we need to understand. Now, a disruptive technology has a 360-degree radar and a 360-degree zone of influence, because it is spread across all domains and it is also spread across all spectrums. I have just listed the few important ones. I believe that the greatest impact of disruptive technology will be in the political domain, because it will disturb the existing balance of power. And that is why the disruptive technology's greatest impact will be in the political domain. Linked to that is its effect in the social domain, because the society will be disrupted to an extent that it will extend an overarching influence on the political domain. And there, obviously, as I said, the great contestation of dialectics of will between powers will overtake. It will, as a military man, I must also say, it will impact the domain and spectrum of military, and I will dwell upon that a little later. But as somebody who has dealt with strategic nuclear matters at close hands, I must profess that when I go deep into the possibilities and probabilities that disruptive technologies open up, I believe that in the strategic domain also it will play a very vital factor. And last but not the least, it will impact the financial and economic side in a big way. And it will also impact our environment the way we understand. Air Marshal Ashfaq Arai has quite eloquently explained the spectrum. At the top of that, obviously, is the artificial intelligence. This is something new to humanity. We always believed in the ultimate human intelligence. But that era is about to end if it has not ended already. You have seen the greatest chess masters of the world beaten hollow and square by artificial intelligence. And that is just the beginning. Obviously, quantum computing and advanced materials will play their own role. And as a military man, I understand how the hypersonic missiles, some of which have already been developed and deployed by at least 2 nations, if not 3 in the world, will impact strategic stability in the globe. The way we live, the way we grow our food, in biotechnologies, that will be a spectrum to look for. And for that, the nanotechnologies and robotics will be an integral part of the spectrum. Now focusing in the military domain, I believe that all 3 traditional domains of the military, that is land, naval and maritime, and air and aerospace, will be impacted to an extent that the character of the war will change, and change not significantly but fundamentally. And we are beginning to see telltale signs of this change character of war in some of the recent conflicts, whether it is in Nagorno-Karabakh or it is in Ukraine. You can see some of the initial signs. But apart from these 3 traditional military domains, the 2 emerging domains that are of great significance and which will probably overpower the first 3 domains that I spoke about, they are cyber and space. So it is in the field of cyber and space that destructive technologies will have their premium shock and awe show to show. Now, in these domains, you are new to the world. Our internet, which we thought was bringing us to a new world, will only act as only a small component of the bigger cyber world, way beyond our current Earth and into the future worlds. And therefore, space will be of vital importance. I admire and salute those who had put Pakistan in the space field in the 1960s. And I hope and pray that as a nation, we can pay greater focus as being a spacefaring nation with all the added advantages that will emerge in the future. Now, that's the traditional military domain. In the strategic domain, what disruptive technologies will do is they will increase strategic leverages. Leverages for those for whom it is a matter of policy choices. So greater toolkit of disruptive technologies, greater and increase in the strategic leverages. What that would imply is that through disruptive technologies, there would be an increase of strategic swath and strategic space for those who are in use of or can employ disruptive technologies by choice to their design. And therefore it will impact the TSR metrics in the strategic domain. So therefore, in the strategic domain, I conclude that disruptive technologies will have an overarching strategic effects, and Pakistan as a nuclear state needs to look closely at these emerging trends, and I'm glad to note that respective individuals and respective organizations are cognizant of this and have understood and are working towards this end. But like all technologies, these disruptive technologies, they pose their own risks. To me, I've just listed 3. I believe that disruptive technologies have the ability to create a technical apartheid between nations that possess and nations that do not possess these technologies. Therefore, the disruptive technologies will impact significantly on national security. To me, disruptive technologies will also impact national sovereignty. I did want to make a point that apart from these risks, there is a more greater risk, not well defined probably at this moment, but lurking somewhere behind. It is that we, as Homo sapien species on this earth, are being challenged for the first time. And therefore there carries a risk that artificial intelligence, if left unbridled, can actually impact the very existence of Homo sapiens in the form and shape as we understand. So these disruptive technologies will create effects. They will create, obviously by virtue of the name as you understand, a disruptive effect. But that can create a larger effect of paralysis, of imbalance, of critical imbalance. But they do also provide opportunities. And I just list 2. One, already mentioned by the Air Marshal, that they can be a game changer across the spectrum and across the games. So if you're wanting to play the game, then disruptive technology is the field or are the fields to actually contest in. But the second is more important for asymmetrical powers. I believe that disruptive technologies will provide asymmetrical advantage. And because they are low in cost and high in effects, therefore in an asymmetrical advantage contestation, this can prove to be a great benefit to the force which is actually lesser in number, or as a force power potential, the nation per se has a lower power potential. This one particular event can put you ahead of the loop. So that's, I believe, the greatest opportunity. In the global construct, I believe that we need to link disruptive technologies with disarmament, because that's the only way we can induce a global standard of ethics into the decision-making loop, the policy-making loop of the world in this domain. If we want to retain control, but then it can't be a club of the few. It has to be that everyone's interests will have to be taken care of. Interests not of the big powers, but interest of the humans first. I'm not very hopeful on that account. Finally, what is the vital component of the disruptive technology? And it is simply one, that is data. Data is the core foundation on which any disruptive technology will be actually based upon. It's the availability of the data, it's the mining of the data, it's the scalability of the data, and it's the security of the data that is going to be more fundamental in the future. To me, this will add a new dimension to national security, but more importantly, national sovereignty. You have to seriously look at data national sovereignty. So what is my concluding thought? I believe that we should harness these disruptive technologies at lightning pace. We must embrace these disruptive technologies as a catalyst for change. And in that, the focus, as I've already said, on cyber and space, and keeping national data very close to our heart and fully secure. We must craft and implement a national policy towards this end, and we must energize and synchronize the national effort. And last but not the least, as I already said, but I thought worth important to conclude, we must be as a nation part of the debate and the process of maintaining human control over these disruptive technologies. I thank you for the invite. Thank you.
Sir, 15. Ladies and gentlemen, very rightly pointed out by General Zubair that the artificial intelligence would be challenging Homo sapiens, and we are already witnessing that when a computer asks a person to prove that he is not a robot. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker for the day is Dr. Rizwana Abbasi. She will discuss impact of disruptive technologies on military doctrines and strategies. Dr. Rizwana Abbasi is presently serving as an associate professor at the National University of Modern Languages, Islamabad. Previously, she served as an associate professor in the School of Humanities and Social Sciences in Bahria University as well as in National Defense University, Islamabad. Dr. Abbasi is a fellow of East-West Institute since May 2018. She received her PhD from University of Leicester, UK, specializing in international security and nuclear non-proliferation. She was also a postdoctoral research fellow and has taught at the same university. She is also a graduate of the Daniel K. Inouye Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, Hawaii. She has authored a book titled Pakistan and the New Nuclear Taboo, Regional Deterrence and the International Arms Control Regime. I will now request Dr. Rizwana Abbasi for her views.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. General Zubair Hayat, Air Marshal Farhat Hussain Khan, Air Marshal Ashfaq Raim, respected panelists, dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and good evening. I'm very delighted to hear General Zubair's comprehensive talk on such a technically advanced, evolving and difficult topic. His talk was quite and pretty comprehensible. I'm very pleased, sir, for you to putting the course in the right direction. As we all understand and know that for more than 70 years, nuclear deterrence led to have stabilizing effects between adversaries where neither side had an incentive to initiate a nuclear first strike. At present, the world is experiencing a fourth industrial revolution in which a wave of new and transformative technologies are underway and being developed. The fourth revolution is leading to create a new generation of smarter, cheaper, and highly effective weapon systems. The world is entering an era of smarter precision era. Is entering into a smarter precision era. New technologies always, I believe, lead to had transformative effect on warfare and military thinking. There is correlation between geopolitical settings and technological evolution, which in turn has undermined the tactical, operational, and strategic level of warfare domain. Doctrines and strategies crafted and implemented in the previous decades are becoming obsolete, I believe. It is not only the technologies that undermine doctrines, destabilize deterrence, and survivability of nuclear force, but also geopolitical settings and status-driven ambitions that compel them to include these technologies in existing inventories of their arsenals for their own advantage. All new technologies that are included in weapon inventory for combat are called disruptive. These technologies are disruptive in a sense that they aim to change the status quo to their own advantage once fielded in the battlefield. The existing body of literature suggests that these disruptive technologies could erode foundation of deterrence theory, thereby undermining nuclear strategic stability through its effects on nuclear second strike capability, including C4, ISR, and force postures. The impact of these technologies on nuclear correlates to the capacity of these technologies relating to its operationalization and understanding of force structure of the states against which these technologies are going to be employed. Advances in new technologies have made nuclear force more vulnerable by providing confidence to the first mover, thereby increasing the risk of a first disarming strike in a crisis. Simultaneously, leaders fearing disarming first strikes may choose to launch nuclear weapons first before losing them. So that is a critical dilemma. More so, new technologies will contribute to accidental or inadvertent nuclear escalation by threatening dual-use C2 assets in space and cyberspace, or by squeezing time for decision makers as they may have to choose nuclear use option under the false belief that an enemy's nuclear attack is imminent. So in this context, I believe certain technologies that have undermined doctrinal strategies are hypersonic weapons, drones, AI, space-based technologies, and cyber technologies. So I will first like to shed light on hypersonic weapons. So two types of hypersonic weapons are currently being produced: hyperglided vehicles and hypersonic cruise missile technologies. So implication of hyperglided vehicles and hypersonic cruise missiles are often cited as key challenges to nuclear stability. So first, that they can be nuclear laced and used to bypass an adversary's missile defense systems. Second, that they can be employed for long-range non-nuclear precision strikes. While these could make it possible to undertake disarming strikes against nuclear force of your adversary. So the sophisticated guidance systems and high level of accuracy of hypersonic weapons make them potentially suitable for non-nuclear precision strikes operation. During a crisis, it would not be clear whether warheads were nuclear armed or conventionally laced, and what the perceived target was, which in turn affects operational strategies and spirit of declared doctrines. The idea is that delivery systems have become so accurate and sensors so transparent at locating, tracking, and engaging targets that protecting and concealing weapon system seems to becoming increasingly challenging. So argument I hold that nuclear forces that have long been as survivable to hold nuclear deterrence have now become vulnerable. So I have already built debate internationally on the question that nuclear deterrence somehow losing its relevance and notion in the near future and in the futuristic warfare domain. So drones, I would like to talk about drones. So when developed in quantities, drones could operate in swarms that overwhelm adversaries' military platforms and targets. So impact of drones on warfare is such where weapons will have full autonomy to make decisions whom to attack without human input. So armed drones and other weapons with varying degree of autonomy have become far more commonly used by high-tech militaries such as US, Russia, UK, Israel, and South Korea, along with China. So deadly drone arm race is growing while regulators lag behind. So drones have become effective precision strikes and damage control instruments of this era, thereby comprising the notion of existing doctrines and concept of deterrence. So I would like to precisely shed light on AI and machine learning. So AI could also be employed to rapidly sort through vast quantities of data, improving intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and making it easier to target adversaries' forces. So AI constitute, as was highlighted by General Zubair, coding computer systems and software capable of performing tasks that require intelligence if undertaken by humans. So it is not one separate system, but sometimes some things that can be applied in many different ways depending on a particular task. So automation is the application of AI to particular tasks, some of which might involve robotics and therefore automated or autonomous weapon systems. So similarly, there are different variants of autonomy in terms of function and sophistication. So arguably, AI and autonomy could be used right across the nuclear realm. So at present, however, its application is quite limited as users may not be confident about how decisions were reached by using AI. So computational power and a desire to keep humans in the loop also impose limits, and users are reluctant at this stage to trust AI produced information because the process supporting the generation of that information are opaque. So AI and machine learning, I would say, would lead to create deep fakes for disinformation campaign that swiftly complicate a nuclear crisis. All these applications are pretty disturbing, but especially those that lead to challenge secure second strike forces or create renewed escalatory risks. I would like to conclude argument on AI by saying that AI and machine learning in military application risk increasingly nuclear instability due to blur lines between the conventional and the nuclear realm, as was highlighted by General Zubair. So the enhanced effectiveness of conventional platforms leads to whole nuclear assets at risks. So autonomy in conventional weapon system is once advanced in capability. Thus, it would then lead to increase, deterrence instability. So I would say that space-based technologies are also leading to have impact on nuclear settings. So space-based weapon sensors, defensive interceptors, and the diffusion of counter space capabilities will make space an increasingly contested military environment. Right now, US is heavily dependent on space-based assets and computers than its rivals such as Russia and China, and which will, I would say, likely imply counter space attacks in the early stage of any conflict with the US in a bid to disrupt US C4ISR systems. So space-based technologies are becoming effective for the purpose of operationalization of nuclear force in terms of communication for C2 systems, target identification and acquisition, surveillance, intelligence gathering, guidance for delivery systems, and BMD systems. So the ISR capabilities are essential for nuclear weapons to envision an effective first strike against nuclear adversary. So space-based technologies offer the most reliable means for real-time and real ISR data at location where other military tools are non-productive or unproductive. So stays temptation for, I would say these technologies also for the reason that these are cost-effective, readily available. So worryingly, there is lack of progress in developing normative instruments to regulate these developments. So PAROS is an impasse since many years in CD, as technology holders are unwilling to discuss this issue at the global forums. So impact of cyber and nuclear strategies is again quite big. So in the nuclear realm, cyber challenges involve the risk of malicious actors intruding in the software, hardware, data networks, and processes of computer systems that govern weapons, C2 communications and warning systems, as well as people and information that operate them. So the vulnerability of a nuclear weapon systems to hackers is a product of its reliance on digital software. So any invader wanting to compromise network-centric systems, data, and people could use a range of different paths. So the most difficult would be direct attacks on weapons and C2 systems, such as by gaining access to these highly productive networks in order to release malware into these systems. So the supply chain of hardware and software used across the nuclear enterprise might be targeted. So another risk would be to interfere with the data and information needed by these systems or with the human operators who rely on them. So all this has clear implications, I would say, for signaling, crisis communication, and inadvertent escalation between nuclear-armed adversaries. So I would like to conclude by arguing that the existing concepts of deterrence, existing doctrines, and operational strategies have been challenged by a storm of technological evolution of this century. This has created an emerging gray area and increasingly blur line between nuclear and conventional systems. A likelihood of less time for decision making and a more complex information environment in which to operate, as well as new pathways to escalation, miscalculation, and entanglement, all of which could increase the risk of nuclear use. Technological developments and risks do not transpire in a political void. So in this way, confidence building measures across the nuclear spectrum are important. So moreover, future mechanism of control, restraint, and risk reduction might demand different sort of focus than the existing ones. All states developing hypersonic weapons should be encouraged to keep nuclear and conventional delivery vehicles separated, distinguish clearly between tactical and strategic applications, and where possible, increase the time it takes to launch them. So an agreement is needed on non-deployment of hypersonic weapons. There is need to ban autonomous nuclear armed delivery systems. This might include working towards a moratorium on anti-satellite system testings. There is need for states to consider a moratorium on targeting nuclear command and control systems. Governance of AI and lethal autonomous weapon systems laws is needed. And I would argue and say that professionals and academics working on this topic must educate policymakers on these technologies and the risk that they involve, so that the nature and the seriousness of this application in the nuclear realm is understood at the highest levels. So this would, I would say, probably also involve engaging the private sector, where many of the most important developments in AI and automation are taking place. So with this note, I would like to thank you all for your patience and time. Thank you.
According to Dr. Rizwana Abbasi, the disruptive technologies will have severe implications for the nuclear stability and therefore underscored the necessity of international cooperation to define rules and norms. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker is Dr. Adil Sultan, who will speak on disruptive technologies and strategic stability. Dr. Adil is Acting Dean Faculty of Aerospace and Strategic Studies and Chair Department of Strategic Studies at the Air University. Earlier, he served as a Director at Center for Aerospace and Security Studies and a Visiting Research Fellow at Center for Science and Security Studies, King's College, London. He had also been a Visiting Fellow at the International Institute for Strategic Studies, London in 2015, and a visiting fellow at the Stimson Center, Washington, D.C. in 2006. Dr. Sultan has served Pakistan Air Force for 31 years and at the Strategic Plans Division for over 14 years, where he dealt with arms control and non-proliferation related issues. During his tenure at the SPD, Dr. Sultan served as the Director Arms Control and Disarmament and Director Research and Analysis at the Policy, Doctrine and Strategy branch of the SPD. Dr. Adil, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, sir. After General Zubair's comprehensive and very concise remarks, opening keys address, I must say my speech has been disrupted because whatever he has said, I'm going to say most of those things, but in more specific ways. So what he was covering was the strategic campus. I'll use some technical language to confuse the audience over here, and that's what the social scientists do. I'm grateful to President Kass, Air Marshal Farhat, and Air Marshal Ishfaq for inviting me for this, to share my thoughts on this very interesting topic. I'm also honored that so many of my colleagues and seniors are over here, and it's always comfortable to be there in their company. I do know that many of the audience who are here, they are more versed in technical aspects of these emerging technologies. So I'll not go into details, but what I'm going to do is just talk about the strategic concepts, which General Zubair has broadly covered, and I'll go a bit deeper into those. And I think since these technologies are emerging, and still we have to learn a lot, and we need to have more such sessions, such discourses, to understand their impact on the future of warfare. So the topic that was given to me was disruptive technologies and the impact on strategic stability. So I'll take 18 minutes, and that's the TOT I have to make. The strategic environment today is more complex and multifaceted in terms of political security and technological developments than it was during the Cold War period. The evolving multipolar, or what can be best described as a non-polar world, being shaped by the growing influence of multinational corporations and big tech companies, is likely to define the future security outlook. According to one of the scholars who wrote the book, The New Rules of War, he says that due to the advent of new technologies, human lives in a state-centric world will become less important because war is now divorcing from the state and technology is becoming a huge enabler. This will profoundly change international relations in the next 30 years. While this prediction may take some time, the ongoing revolution that we are experiencing today has already altered our orientation towards the warfare. Interestingly, most emerging technologies have been developed by commercial entities with their use in the everyday banking, health, communications, transport, etc. And militaries have mainly adopted some of these to revolutionize and prepare for intelligent wars. Due to the dual nature of new technologies, it has made it difficult to regulate and build global norms to prevent its misuse. There is an ongoing debate on the legality of use of emerging and disruptive technologies for military means under the international humanitarian law, but without any consensus on basic definitions and how these technologies could risk human lives, especially when their use may not necessarily lead to mass-level deaths and casualties. The acquisition and integration of some of the emerging and disruptive technologies into conventional weapons has the potential to reduce power differential between relatively smaller but technologically advanced countries and the bigger powers. Use of these technologies for strategic purposes may also blur the lines and fire breaks between conventional and strategic warfare, thus making future conflicts more complex and difficult to manage. Let me take this opportunity to briefly summarize salient characteristics of some of the major technologies that could possibly have positive or negative effect on strategic stability. As we know, biotechnology can help prevent pandemics, but at the same time, it can also spread pandemics. A pangolin consumed in one part of the world led to the spread of COVID-19 and disruption of global supply chains. Developments in quantum science have led to unprecedented computational speed that can solve the hardest analytical problems. This has reduced the time for decision making. Advanced materials being made today can be more stronger, lighter, and withstand extreme temperatures, which can be used for carrying more payloads on missiles and spacecrafts. Artificial intelligence, which has been talked about, is another enabling technology that could be used in automated decision making. Development of hypersonic missiles drastically shortens the flight time with their ability for extreme maneuvering, thus making these penetrable in a highly defended airspace environment. There are several other technologies that continue to transform our daily lives, and once incorporated into military use, it can make future battlefields multidimensional and technologically integrated across the air, land, sea, and the space domains. This could change the character of future warfare. But this does not necessarily mean that conventional wars would become obsolete or the salience of nuclear deterrence would reduce in the era of emerging technologies. The world has yet not experienced cyber Hiroshima or an all-out artificial intelligence-guided robotic warfare to fully comprehend the impact of disruptive technologies on strategic stability. Looking at the history of technological revolutions, there is a tendency to oversell new inventions and the potential to change the character of warfare. Most assumptions about the impact of new technologies may eventually be proven wrong, as some of these technologies may become obsolete even before they are put to test. The fate of others will be decided on the battlefield, depending upon how different militaries are able to employ these into their operations and reap the desired dividends. Notwithstanding the uncertainty surrounding the future of disruptive technologies, many countries are building their capacity in the field of cyber, artificial intelligence, quantum computers, etc., to achieve information dominance, which General Zubair also referred to. This is necessary to gain superiority in decision making and is considered essential for the future of warfare. The desire to achieve information dominance is pushing the world towards information arms racing, with more resources being diverted to build and modernize national technical means that could help access information while denying the same to the others. Now, talking specifically about what impact it could have on strategic stability. Strategic stability in simple terms can be defined as absence of a major war. This is more desirable amongst nuclear weapon states, where a conventional conflict could potentially escalate to an all-out war with the possibility of nuclear use. The resultant stability at the strategic level due to the existence of nuclear weapons could also provide incentive for states to engage in a limited military conflict at the lower spectrum of warfare, which has been explained by the social scientists as stability-instability paradox. Some of the disruptive technologies that can be employed for non-kinetic warfare could also provide additional incentive for states to engage in limited warfare without risking a major escalation. Such strategies are inherently dangerous, especially amongst the nuclear-armed states. A conflict triggered by a sub-strategic offensive by using one of the enabling technologies could quickly escalate to a nuclear conflict, thus making it difficult to predict and regulate. The potential wormhole escalation resulting due to unregulated use of disruptive technologies can unfold across different domains and switch from one echelon of conflict to another. To deal with these complex threats, states will have to develop capacity for integrated deterrence across the full spectrum of threats and potential wormholes, depending upon the resources and the nature of threat matrix. Disruptive technologies could have both positive as well as negative impact on strategic stability, crisis escalation, and crisis management. If artificial intelligence and quantum sensors can reduce the time for decision making, targeting, and delivery launch time, leading to quick escalation with a greater possibility of miscalculation, this advantage of compressed time for data analysis would also be available to the other side, allowing it more time for decision making and responding with most appropriate option. Similarly, if advanced sensing and surveillance radars can help improve the accuracy of long-range delivery vehicles, it could also be used to potentially detect nuclear-capable submarines, thus making these vulnerable to adversaries' interdiction through precision, long-range, hypersonic, and other conventional or nuclear weapons. I know my naval colleagues won't like what I'm going to say. And a submarine-based second strike capability is considered advantageous only if it remains undetectable. If modern technologies are able to neutralize this advantage, states would have little incentive to invest in developing and maintaining a second strike capability that is no longer invincible and does not provide the option of an assured second strike. Now, another concept that I want to introduce, this is a relatively new concern, that's a nuclear entanglement. This can happen when one side uses or threatens to use dual-capable or conventional delivery systems or employs non-kinetic means to neutralize or degrade adversaries' nuclear forces or command and control infrastructure. For instance, if a state uses a conventional hypersonic weapon or launches a cyber attack against adversaries' nuclear command and control center or early warning systems, there is a likelihood that the defender might perceive such an attack as part of adversary's decapitating first strike, thus forcing it to respond with nuclear weapons to avoid use it or lose it dilemma. To counter such a threat and as part of its deterrence by denial strategy, the defender may also consider placing its nuclear forces on a higher alert status and pre-delegate the launch authority. This would have the potential of miscalculation, leading to an unauthorized use of nuclear weapons, and therefore could adversely impact strategic stability. Major powers, including Russia, China, and United States, are developing nuclear and non-nuclear capabilities as part of their cross-domain deterrence postures that could provide multiple options to deter potential adversaries from contemplating nuclear or non-nuclear counterforce operations that could otherwise lead to uncontrolled escalation. Russia, for instance, is concerned about the prospects of a non-nuclear regional conflict escalating to a nuclear one. To ensure that NATO or US does not exploit its conventional vulnerabilities, Russia has adopted a nuclear posture that some have labeled it as escalate to de-escalate. Russia has retained the option of responding with nuclear weapons in case US or NATO forces contemplate a disarming strike using non-nuclear high-precision weapons, hypersonic boost glide weapons, or other disruptive technologies to target Russian offensive forces or its command and control infrastructure. Russia fears that NATO's conventional advantage, coupled with adequate missile defenses in the region, makes such a scenario plausible, and therefore escalating a non-nuclear conflict to a nuclear one is the most suitable response option to prevent the other side from embarking on this kind of adventurism. President Putin's statements during the ongoing Ukrainian crisis on the possibility of a nuclear use in case the US or NATO forces get directly involved in what Russia terms to be a regional conflict is a reflection of a similar thinking. China is another major power, wary of new technological developments that could impact its strategic thinking in the long run. China is the only country with an unconditional low first-use nuclear policy and does not see emerging technologies contributing towards nuclear entanglement, as it struggles to maintain distinction between nuclear and non-nuclear wars. According to some Chinese experts, the hype over disruptive technologies and its impact on strategic stability could be deliberate and intended to prevent China from pursuing some of the advanced technologies for its legitimate military needs. Interestingly, China itself is developing new offensive technologies, including the anti-satellite capability. It has also tested fractional orbital bombardment system, commonly known as FOBs, to evade US fixed missile defense system. These developments are being viewed by China's adversaries as destabilizing and may encourage some of them to develop similar capabilities or consider launching a preemptive first strike against China in a future crisis to sufficiently degrade China's offensive strategic forces. Like the other two major powers, the United States is also investing in emerging technologies. Rather, it's leading in this race. It has already declared that in case of a cyber attack by its adversaries, it reserves the right to respond with nuclear weapons. This offensive posturing is as a result of cyber and nuclear entanglement is likely to complicate deterrence dynamics amongst the major powers. The US is already spearheading the global competition in disruptive technologies, which includes the capability to intervene adversaries' command and control structure. As per the recent statement by their head of cyber command, the United States carried out probing operations against Russia from the Ukrainian territory to map adversaries' network infrastructures and identify potential vulnerabilities. The US has also developed non-nuclear precision weapons that can be used to target adversaries' nuclear command and control and delivery systems, which further heightens the possibility of miscalculation, forcing the other side to respond with nuclear escalation. Space domination is another area where the United States has invested significant resources. It has developed capability to interdict adversaries' space-based surveillance platforms. Such offensive capabilities can potentially increase the dangers of nuclear entanglement, which is not specific to great powers competition only, but is also relevant to our region as India operationalizes its anti-satellite capability. India is also in the process of developing hypersonic weapons that can be used for non-nuclear counter-force precision strikes. It is also developing missile defense shield, which includes the acquisition of S-400 anti-missile system from Russia. These capabilities, once operationalized, does not provide a foolproof protection against adversaries' retaliatory strike capability, but it may incentivize the Indian decision makers to contemplate a preemptive first strike. India could also use this capability as a coercive strategy and prevent Pakistan from early deployment of its short-range missiles in response to India's evolving doctrine of fighting a limited war under a nuclear overhang. After the conclusion of war foundational agreements with the United States, India's spatial orientation has received a significant boost. The Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement, commonly known as BICA, that the two sides have signed provides India access to the US space-based assets. Recently concluded Space Situational Agreement is likely to further enhance India's potential to monitor Pakistan's strategic assets during crisis and improve India's situational awareness and targeting strategy. To conclude, technology is evolving at a very fast pace, making it difficult for technologically dependent countries like Pakistan to remain abreast with the new developments and explore their utility for the military purposes. Due to relatively weak research and development infrastructure and disconnect between various national stakeholders, the existing developments in emerging and disruptive technologies are not being optimally utilized for the national development needs and for military purposes. Pakistan faces serious internal and external challenges that are likely to be compounded with the introduction of destabilizing technologies and military doctrines by our adversaries. Our conventional and nuclear deterrence remains credible as of now. However, to meet the future challenges, Pakistan may have to review its full spectrum deterrence posture that should be able to deal with all possible threats from land, air, sea, or space. To meet such an ambitious deterrence posture, Pakistan would need significant resources, which may be difficult to spare in the near future, but the objective can be achieved by bringing synergy in the existing efforts and prioritizing the national needs. There is also a requirement to increase collaboration between the defense and academia. The US Department of Defense has an ongoing program which is called SMART, that stands for Science, Mathematics, and Research for Transformation Program. The DoD funds number of undergraduate and graduate students who have the aptitude to become digital and keyboard warriors. These are then offered jobs in relevant labs to work on emerging and disruptive technologies. If we are planning to prepare for the future warfare, we may consider similar initiatives and make long-term investment in building human resource who would be specialists in their fields and in a better position to exploit the potential of emerging and disruptive technologies for socio-economic development as well as for the military means. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Adil. A point I could gather from his talk was that the information dominance will have profound impact on any military conflicts in future. Ladies and gentlemen, our last speaker for the seminar is Air Vice Marshal Faiz Amir. He'll discuss impact of disruptive technologies on future wars in South Asia. Air Vice Marshal retired Faiz Amir has served in Pakistan Air Force for over 35 years. He has been a distinguished professional and commanded the prestigious Combat Commander School of Pakistan Air Force. He also served as Commandant of the National Security College of National Defense University, Islamabad. He possesses high command and management skills along with advanced academic background. As a Vice Chancellor, Air Marshal Faiz remained determined to carry forward the mission of quality education at Air University and worked for the well-being of employees. He emphasized on teaching quality, advanced research, professional dedication, and well-coordinated teamwork to thrive in academia for earning highest ranking among the national and international universities. Sir, the floor is yours. Excuse me.
Thank you. Since everything has already been said, I'll give you a joke. It reminds me of my days in National Defense College as chief instructor. After a student's lecture, I asked the officer, Hanif sahab, kaisa raha? So he said, sir, shukar hai, rostrum lakdi ka tha. Warna aap meri larasti hui, kampti hui taange dekhte. So thank you, Cass, for having a wooden rostrum here. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, President, Center of Aerospace and Security Studies, Air Marshal Farhat Hussain, General Zubair Mahmood Hayat. Ladies and gentlemen, my gratitude to Cass for the invitation to participate in today's discussion. My topic, impact of disruptive technologies on future wars in South Asia, needs a new focus. I say so because when we discuss South Asia, we should bear in mind that the strongest military power in South Asia is not an Asian power, but with its fleets and bases in the region, it is American power. This is an important consideration because US-India Global Strategic Partnership, underpinned by the three US-Indian military agreements, LIMOA, COMCASA, and BECA, make US a party to conflicts in the region. Hence, US technological and material assistance to India, whether it is logistics, secure communications, or geospatial services, would impact any war in South Asia. Here I would draw some parallels with US assistance to Ukraine in the ongoing war. Since a future war in South Asia could be between India and China, so that makes China also a serious stakeholder in South Asia. My point here is that at this moment in history, South Asia is overcrowded, rather claustrophobic, when we consider the convergence of interests of three major powers in a finite geographical area called subcontinent. So to focus the scope of my discussion, I would title my talk as Impact of Disruptive Technologies on Wars that Involve Pakistan. You may have noticed that I have not selected the abstract time frame future, because for me, in the age of internet, we are in a perpetual state of war. It is a chaotic world where actual war in many ways, as General Zubair said, is about information dominance. As we talk of impact of disruptive technologies on war, we should keep in mind that no technology has shaped war and will continue to shape war as much as the existence of nuclear arsenals in South Asia. Our relations with both India and USA are shaped by our nuclear capability. Back in February 2019, India did try to find a window for limited operations, but it found, to its dismay, that the misadventure rapidly escalated and had to be abandoned. Similarly, our transactional relationship with US has largely been about Afghanistan, but the long-term engagement between the two of us is governed by the superpowers' concern, not about nuclear weapons in the region, but about nuclear weapons in Pakistan only. This non-acceptance of Pakistan's capability continues to have consequences for Pakistan. With this geopolitical background in mind, ladies and gentlemen, when we look across the canvas of developing technologies, we find that it is convergence between technologies that makes them potentially more disruptive. It is convergence between artificial intelligence and robotics that create lethal autonomous weapons. It is artificial intelligence convergence with big data, cybersecurity, and electronic warfare that has started to shape wars, as is evident in more than one ways in Ukraine war. I shall discuss the Ukraine war a little down the lane. Ladies and gentlemen, New America Foundation in 2014, in a study called Blurred Lines, stressed that technological drivers of warfare have erased the boundaries between what was traditionally regarded as war and peace, military and civilian, between public and private, and between national and international, I unquote. Concealed in these blurred lines of war and peace, called the gray zone, are the coercive statecraft activities that remain below the threshold of a formal declared war. An Australian government study concluded that gray zone campaigns are cumulative and can cause targets to lose without fighting. These range of gray zone activities include coercive economic actions, cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, assassinations, and other influence operations like supporting insurgencies in a target country. These all being an old bag of tricks. It is the central role that new technologies play that needs to be understood for defending against these campaigns. As mentioned earlier, AI as deep learning is enabling increasingly realistic photo, audio, and video digital forgeries, popularly known as deepfakes. Using deepfake technology, social media and botnets amplify a message or narrative to foment discord and confusion in the target audience. Experts observe that gray zone activities are more pronounced and effective in large urban centers, especially in the megacities where large communities live in slum-like areas, and youth is easily radicalized through social media platforms, as was the case in color revolutions and Arab Spring. According to the Bureau of Statistics of Pakistan 2017 census, Pakistan has around 100 cities with population more than 100,000 people. Two of these are classified as mega cities with population more than 10 million people, Karachi with 15 million and Lahore with 11 million. Pakistan finds itself in the midst of one such comprehensive campaign that includes economic pressures, supports subversive activities by non-state actors, and generates false news reports to influence public discourse, erode public trust, and attempt to blackmail government officials. Coming to more conventional aspects of war, I find some features of war in Ukraine relevant because technologies used confirm trends in the warfare. In Ukraine war, cyber warfare has emerged as a key enabler of the war. Cyber activities include neutralization of command and control centers in the field, network disruptions, website hackings, and intense jamming of GPS of Ukrainian drones, which are used to locate the Russian troops and tanks to direct artillery fire. Russia has moved its heavy jamming equipment close to battlefield in Donbas region and is shaping the war by disrupting command and control of Ukrainian forces. Russia has used T-72 tanks, cruise missiles, multiple rocket launchers, systems, and air power to gradually but consistently force its way through Ukrainian defenses. On the other hand, Ukraine claims to have stalled Russian offensive largely using NATO-supplied intelligence information, Javelin anti-tank missiles, and Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. However, the greatest help to Ukraine came from commercial satellites. Amateur civilians use commercial satellite imagery and open source intelligence to detect and verify information about Russia's military maneuvers. Working from homes and shelters, people have built apps of war. One such app people use to report the movements of Russian troops, sending location-tagged videos directly to Ukrainian intelligence agencies. They have created a virtual network linking social media, smartphones, and drones. This, in great part, has helped Ukrainian military in cutting its losses and planning effective counteroffensives. Elon Musk's Starlink, with more than 2,200 satellites in low orbit, provide broadband internet for communication networks, which Russians find hard to jam. Additionally, NATO satellites and surveillance aircraft help in keeping vigil on Russian forces. It is widely believed that private satellites are transforming the character of modern conflict. Extensive use of space has become crucial to modern warfare, and that no military should expect to win a battle without support from space. Drones are being used to capture enormous data sets for analysis by artificial intelligence and using that for precision targeting. Surprisingly, it includes pinpointing the location of soldiers or civilians by heat maps, digital signals, and media posts. Drones are also shaping the perception of war by recording and sharing videos of Russian losses as well as Ukraine's civilian casualties during the war. In overall analysis, so far, the drones with a high attrition rate have emerged as a war-enabling machine and not as a war-winning machine. I don't intend to leave the impression that the Ukrainian war is all about cyber warfare, commercial satellites, and drones. These all enable an environment where battles of tanks and artillery rage, in which both sides exchange heavy fire as they fight over small amounts of territory. I see drone as part of evolution of air warfare, whose fundamental principle remains to avoid exposure to enemy fire. Current generation of drones remain vulnerable to electronic warfare and air defense systems, and therefore are unlikely to shift the operational balance towards the offensive side. They're also unlikely to cancel existing military asymmetries because they require support from expensive and complex military assets as well as highly trained personnel. Currently, only rich and militarily powerful states can use drones effectively in military operations. In India-Pakistan context, I see drones almost in missions similar to Ukraine, that is data collection, reconnaissance, directing artillery fire, and making videos of battles to shape public perceptions. Additionally, drones could also be used against tanks and air defense assets in spoofing, jamming, and kill roles. Elsewhere, small commercial drones in the hands of non-state actors could create huge problems for military planners, personnel, and installations. Cyber warfare could emerge as a greater threat to Pakistan, both in peace and war. Here, Indian advantage resides in its access to American, Israeli, and Russian equipment. India-US Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement, signed in 2020, enables supply of high-end equipment as well as real-time intelligence and information. Similarly, Russia, which has been India's largest supplier of arms in the last decade, would make available its electronic and cyber warfare equipment, especially for India's firm stance India's firm stance on war in Ukraine. In cyber war, Pakistan could face denial of service in one or more of the fiber optic undersea cables, which would highly undermine the functionality of our computer systems. This could be followed by a more massive, far-reaching, and invasive cyber attack. Hypersonic missiles have been talked about. I'll just say that since BrahMos would have the ability to defeat advanced air and defense missile systems, it would grant certain advantage to India. BrahMos 1 has a speed of Mach 2.8, doesn't qualify as a hypersonic weapon, but it remains a threat to our ships and our deep targets inland. BrahMos 2, with a claimed speed of Mach 8, is expected to be test-fired in 2024. There are no indications that it would have strategic warhead. However, many analysts fear that BrahMos' short time of flight and its unpredictable flight path could heighten the risk of miscalculation or unintended escalation in the event of a conflict. One worrying thought would be, having abandoned no first use policy, would India employ BrahMos in preemptive decapitating strike? Highly unlikely, but remains an option in the bag of tricks. I see metal against metal on land highly unlikely in the future war. Looking at the demographics of map of Pakistan's border areas, districts of Sialkot, Narowal, Lahore, Kasur, and Okada look pretty unfriendly for a larger maneuver because of dense population. Remember the 100 towns with more than 100,000 population, they reside, most of them are in Punjab. Areas Bahawalnagar down could be the likely place for tank battles, if any. Those forces, along with their supply chains, could, however, remain highly vulnerable to electronic warfare, armed drones, and above all, air power. Air power will continue to play an increasingly important role in air and in support of land and sea forces. Pakistan needs to understand the changing political and technological environment in which air power would now be employed. Air power, having become the weapon of choice to remain lethal and viable in conflict, needs a strategy that focuses on the importance of information warfare. Ladies and gentlemen, to achieve a significant increase in military effectiveness, the new technology must be married to an appropriate organization, concept of operations, set of tactics, command and control system, and supporting infrastructure. I'll repeat that. To achieve a significant increase in military effectiveness, the new technology must be married to an appropriate organization, concept of operations, set of tactics, command and control system, and supporting infrastructure. Technologies have changed the soldier we knew. Today, militaries face additional challenges in training, educating, and retaining their personnel. My one recommendation, and I will follow General Zubair in that, before I conclude, would be for us to transform all data that we collect from all over the globe about all stakeholders in the region into a weapon system. A weapon system that informs decision makers, enables readiness, accords dominance in information and cyberspace domains, and avoids information overload. To summarize, we started with geopolitical situation, discussed disruption caused by emerging technologies in gray zone or hybrid warfare, had a look at the role of new technologies continue to play in war in Ukraine, and addressed at some length the impact of disruptive technologies in Indo-Pak scenario. My concluding remark is that historically, technology has impacted character of war and not the nature of the beast that remains destructive and disruptive. Thank you very much.
Now I would request President Cass to kindly present mementos to all the distinguished speakers. First, I would request General Zubair Mahmood Hayat to please receive your memento, sir. Now, I request Dr. Rizwana Abbasi to please receive her memento. Now, I would invite Dr. Adil Sultan to please receive his memento. I request AVM Faiz Amir to please receive your memento from President Kass, sir. Right, sir. Right. Now, I would request President Kass and all the worthy panelists as well as Kass team to join us on stage for a group photograph, please. Sorry? Right. Meanwhile, I request all the guests to proceed for dinner. Thank you.